Welcome to another episode of Sounds Reasonable. I am your host, Dr. Brad, and I am joined in the production of our weekly show by Tim, Tracy, and our newest member of the SR discussion panel, Abby. We are all members of the Free Thought community, and our Sounds Reasonable website can be found on Facebook. Do you experience frequent irrational thoughts? A pervasive belief in a divine sky daddy, an insatiable urge to read horoscopes, perform spells, speak in tongues, or pray? Fortunately, you are now listening to the cure for these ailments. Sounds Reasonable. This show is dedicated to bringing you, the listener, the latest news in free thought, science, logic and reason, and politics and religion. And of course, we encourage you to share your thoughts with us after each episode by posting comments and asking questions on our Facebook page. What is free thought? What does it mean to be a free thinker? The dictionary definition is a person who forms opinions about religion based on reason, independent of tradition, authority, or established belief. Here's Christopher Hitchens' working definition. Our belief is not a belief. Our principles are not a faith. We do not rely solely upon science and reason because these are necessary rather than sufficient factors, but we distrust anything that contradicts science or outrages reason. We may differ on many things, but what we respect is free inquiry, open-mindedness, and the pursuit of ideas for their own sake. We will now move on to our science news segment. And remember that the scientific mind is one that allows its perceptions of reality to be constrained by good evidence and good argument. Now, we are all aware that we are in the middle of a pandemic caused by COVID-2. We're also aware that a vaccine is now being administered that appears to be quite effective against this virus. However, we now have new strains of COVID-2 arising that appear to be even more infectious than the first one. So the big question is, should we be worried? The story I'm going to relay today comes from Yahoo News. It was published on January 15th of this year and was authored by Laura Ramirez and Kate Murphy and is titled, New Coronavirus Variant Circulating in U.S. Has Health Experts on Edge. With the worldwide death toll from coronavirus pandemic topping 2 million on Friday, a new variant of the virus that has begun spreading in the United States has health experts on edge. The reason these mutations or series of mutations in particular are concerned is really because of the higher transmissibility as well as the potential to make the existing vaccines less effective. Yahoo News medical contributor Dr. Kavita Patel said, according to CDC and prevention data, over 75 cases of this variant known as B117 have been identified in 12 states, including New York, Georgia, Connecticut, Colorado, Indiana, Maryland, Minnesota, Pennsylvania, Texas, and Wisconsin. In California, at least 32 cases have been detected, while 22 cases have so far been identified in Florida. On Friday, the CDC predicted the B117 variant could become the dominant strain in the United States by March. Now, the B117 variant, which was first reported in the United Kingdom and is considered roughly 50% more transmissible than the original, is not the only strain of the coronavirus to have emerged in recent weeks. Others have been reported in South Africa and Brazil, raising questions about whether the current vaccines will be effective against all of them. Patel added that while the new mutation does not appear to be deadlier than the previous strain, its rate of transmission is concerning. And that's something that I want to come back to and discuss a little bit. So please remember that point, panel. If 100 people get infected with what we have seen before, and then those same 100 people are infected with the UK variant, there will be 50 additional people in that second group that get infected just because the variant is so much more likely to infect other people, Patel explained. When you have that many more people getting infected, some of those people are going to the hospital. Some of those people might die. For this reason alone, communities where the new, more infectious variant is present may need to consider furthering safety measures, Patel said. Now, most health experts do not think B117 is responsible for the post-holiday surge in some areas of the country. However, NIH Director Francis Collins told the Washington Post on Wednesday that he would not be surprised if U.S. cases of the B117 variant begin to grow pretty rapidly, and warned that the U.S. needs to take immediate action to minimize potential damage from this variant. One important step to slow the spread of the new variant would be to increase the country's genomic surveillance capability, to be able to track the virus's evolution, and to be able to trace the new, more transmissible variants. And mainly due to the inaction of our previous administration, we are lagging way behind in our ability to track genomically these new variants. I saw an interview this past week by the CEO of Illumina. If you don't know what Illumina is, that's a company that has developed very rapid nucleic acid sequencing methods, and he was describing why we're so far behind. Now, unlike the UK and other countries, the US so far does not have a robust centralized system for identifying genetic variants of the coronavirus. However, since November, the CDC has taken steps to ramp up its sequence-based strain surveillance efforts. With the B117 variant now circulating, scaling up vaccination has never been more crucial, Patel said. But since the vaccine rollout has been sluggish so far, we cannot just wait for vaccines. Patel laid out steps the American public should take right now to help control the spread of the new variant. Luckily, they are not any different from what has been recommended for months to prevent infection by the original strain. So, following our steps to avoid the new coronavirus variant, wear an effective mask properly over your nose and mouth. Now, I don't know about you guys, but it drives me nuts to see some dork walking around with his or her mask below her nose. Stay home whenever possible. Socially distance, a minimum of 6 feet. Wash your hands for at least 20 seconds or sing happy birthday twice. Good little trick to know what 20 seconds is. Avoid poorly ventilated indoor places. On masks, Patel noted that it's important to consider their effectiveness. We now know that the quality of a mask matters and how you wear it matters. If you've got a very thin piece of cloth that is just covering your mouth, that is not enough protection. If possible, it would be incredibly important to wear a higher grade surgical mask or some of the more commercially available KN95s or N95, Patel said.
Yeah.
Bottom line, the better the mask, the better the protection. Ramping up vaccination. Regarding the Pfizer, BioNTech, and Moderna vaccines approved for emergency use in the U.S., Patel said they are believed to work effectively against all of the virus mutations because of how the vaccines work. The recent variants that have been identified, however, are concerning because they have mutations in an important location of the virus's genome, the spike protein, which is the pointy structure that gives the coronavirus its crown-like profile and the key that allows it to enter human cells. The vaccines currently available were developed to create antibodies to multiple regions of that spike protein. Therefore, experts are confident that some of the mutations in the newly identified variants will not affect the efficacy of the vaccines. Vaccines don't just work against one form of that spike protein. They help the body create an immune response to multiple aspects of receptors of those spike proteins, Patel said. What is most important now, she said, is getting the vaccine administered to people in the U.S. As of Thursday, over 29 million doses had been distributed, but only 10.3 million Americans had received the first dose, according to the CDC vaccine tracker, a number that fell far short of the federal government's projection to vaccinate at least 20 million with the first dose by the end of 2020. This week, the Trump administration reversed course and said it will no longer hold back millions of doses to ensure second doses will be available. And on Thursday, President-elect Joe Biden unveiled his $1.9 trillion American Rescue Plan to meet his goal of administering 100 million vaccine doses by the end of his first 100 days in office. Scaling up effective outpatient treatments. Until America ramps up its vaccination numbers, therapeutic treatments should also be bolstered. We actually do have treatments that have been helpful in both decreasing the mortality and whether people die from the disease, as well as decreasing the length of stay in the hospital, Patel said. Treatments involve antibodies from patients that have had COVID-19, as well as man-made ones such as monoclonal antibodies. Both therapeutics, if given early, can help neutralize infection, helping prevent more serious outcomes. There have been concerns that some antibody treatments may not work as well if the virus is mutated, according to the former FDA Commissioner, Dr. Scott Gottlieb. However, so far it is unclear to what extent these new variants evade the antibody treatments we currently have, and further research is necessary to determine that. And of course, when it comes to monoclonal antibodies, that's more of a concern than a polyclonal response. And I'll explain the difference when we get to discussion here. Now Patel said these treatments, which are still expensive, are continuing to be studied extensively. While the outpatient antibody treatments are not perfect, they are an option to offer her patients in a clinic setting and to help relieve the strain on overwhelmed hospitals. Finally, Patel recognizes that many Americans are experiencing COVID-19 fatigue, but she says now more than ever, the most important thing we can do is to refresh and reinvigorate the basics of virus mitigation efforts. So, what do you think? Are we in big trouble with these new variants or what?
I see it being an issue specifically for the healthcare system that's already pretty overwhelmed. And so, with it being more transmissible, I see a lot more cases heading to the hospital. And then, of course, because of the overwhelming numbers in the healthcare system, and increasing deaths. So, am I worried that it doesn't seem like it's actually causing more severe cases as far as what the mutation was looking like, but definitely more people are going to get sick if it has a higher transmission rate.
And it looks like, I know with the South African variant, when they were looking at the antibodies that people that had gotten over, had COVID-19 and gotten over it, or were not as effective on that variant. And again, that immune response for those that have gotten it and gotten sick is not as good as the immune response from the vaccine. And as Dr. Brad said, it appears that the vaccine is presenting various forms of that spike protein, so you get a nice polyclonal sera from that. And then there's the California variant that has popped up, I guess, back up, which was isolated first in Southern California, but now is in Northern California. I think they said New York, which had 5 areas of mutation and 3 on the spike protein, and so they're not sure about that one at all yet. And so it just increases the need to get people vaccinated is what it is really going to do or is doing. And it doesn't surprise me, and I'm sure Dr. Brad would agree, that with how rampant we've let the virus occur in the United States, that you're just asking for mutations because we were so lax about trying to control it.
Yeah, I mean, you can equate this to the rise of antibiotic resistance in bacteria, for example. So if you do not take the steps to provide high enough levels of antibiotic to completely eliminate an infection, what you've done is basically selected against those bacterial cells that are unable to dodge the antibiotic, and selected for those that are. And so that's the big problem we have right now. Is we've got so many people infected that the viruses that have, shall we say, easily been eliminated by the immune response have been, and the viruses that are not so easily eliminated are the ones that are surviving, and that appears to be the more highly transmissible strain. So by making sure that we get enough people in the population vaccinated, and the latest numbers I've heard to prevent transmission now is 240 million. So we're talking around 80% of the population needing to be vaccinated to interrupt the transmission chain with these new more highly transmissible variants. Let's say that's a minimum of 200 days from now. If you want to put in perspective in terms of our vaccination rate. So we've got to get that up to 3 million a day, not 1 million, to have any chance at all of having this knocked down by summertime. Otherwise, people are going to be upset that they can't go do things again this summer. And we're just going to have more temper tantrums, et cetera, at your local Walmart and wherever when people are told to keep your mask on. So yeah, that has to be accomplished and ramped up significantly. Now, I am encouraged by the steps that the Biden administration is trying to take here. So hopefully we can get these large vaccination centers set up throughout all of the states and get this done. But yeah, we've got to have a target of 3 million a day. That's got to be the target.
What's disheartening from what I'm hearing is the number of people, the percentage of people that are still leery about getting the vaccine, and even within the healthcare community, it's just mind-boggling that
is astounding within the healthcare community.
Yeah.
We can't help those people. I just don't think we can help those people.
You read accounts where workers in nursing homes where you have 40% or more that don't want to get the vaccine, and even in hospitals. And one of my former students, we were talking, and she's just finishing up her last semester for the RN program at Iowa Western, and she has some of her fellow students that are working and part-time now or whatever, but they're not have the opportunity to get the vaccine. They're not getting the vaccine. And I just want to shake them.
Do they ever give any rationale, or they just say I'm not getting?
Well, it's unfounded fears, and I think part of it is not explaining well enough the vaccine and to them. And I actually my superintendent asked me to give a talk, so I put together a little presentation about the two vaccines and presented it Friday at our staff meeting.
Oh, good job, Tim.
Yeah. So just to kind of dispel fears about it, and he's sending out a survey to see who wants to get people in line to who wants to get the vaccine when it becomes available. So hopefully it will help. And I did have some call or some emails about asking some questions and things like that I didn't cover, but yeah. So
it's really important though, even though. And we have all these people that don't want the vaccine, even within the healthcare system. And that 240 million mark, I just don't see that happening without getting more people on board. Like we do need to reach those numbers to stop the transmission. Otherwise, I mean, it's a perfect storm for this virus to be able to move around and evolve. And it's just going to keep happening if we don't get it under control. And if we have people literally not willing to get the vaccine, and then also not willing to wear masks, not willing to stay home, not willing to do these things. I mean, I don't know. It's like Tim said, a little disheartening that more people can't come together to solve this problem.
To me, that I know there's big resistance out there to governmental mandates, but I mean, if ever one was needed, here it is. There are all kinds of mandates that we don't like. But in terms of, for example, and I'm sure you're well aware of this, Abby, in terms of children entering school, there's all kinds of vaccination requirements they have to have. Why shouldn't this be one of them? And then
we have those people though.
I'm sorry, Tracy.
We have those people though who.
Oh yeah. Yeah, sure. I'm well aware of those people.
Those people.
And two, if you can convince certain businesses, airlines, whatever, that say, hey, you can't get on our plane or you can't get into my store unless you can show your vaccination card.
Mm-hmm.
So now it's coming from the business industry. We begin getting those to partner up and say, okay, we've got to do this to stop.
The industry whose voice, in my view anyway, and maybe some of you have heard it, but I haven't. The voice that seems to be missing from a key industry is the health insurance industry. The health insurance industry has got to be getting close to bankrupt over the number of people that are in the hospital over this.
Right.
I can't believe they aren't absolutely screaming at the top of their lungs, get vaccinated or we're not going to insure you.
Right.
Uh-huh.
Well,
oh, yeah.
And then you
Good
saw.
point. Good point.
I think I posted that the UK study where they looked at almost 48,000 discharged hospital patients, and the number that that came back, like 29% ended up back in the hospital, and of those 12.3% died with a second infection.
That's because viruses, quote unquote, are clever. They are not going to mount or drive the mounting of the immune response that's going to wipe them out.
Right.
They're going to try to dysregulate your immune response so that they don't get wiped out.
Yeah.
And so that's the huge difference, between vaccination and quote unquote just waiting to get the natural infection for herd immunity, which unfortunately was the strategy of the previous administration, or at least a number of people in it were certainly promoting it.
And again, it's getting those the immune response, so you get those IgA mucosal, antibodies there to do a preventative, to be your first line of defense.
I think part of this has to do with lack of science literacy in the general population. So, I think a lot of it, I'm not sure how to combat it. As a science teacher, and I think Tim, you probably understand that, like, you do your best to try to explain these things logically to students, but we just have such a poor understanding of the science and the general public that when you talk about vaccines, they don't understand what that means. They think it's, they're giving you the virus, or they're, and it's,
Mm-hmm.
people don't understand how that works. Or like herd immunity. A lot of people that didn't have a clear understanding of what that meant was throwing that around like, oh yeah, we'll just get herd immunity. And it's like that, it's not really how that works. You're gonna have a lot of people die trying to get herd immunity naturally. So like,
Right.
And it doesn't work in this case. Yeah.
Yeah, because
Right.
if we had,
what
if
we're
we
seeing
had,
is
go ahead.
So, we're seeing the evolution of the virus. So obviously the herd immunity naturally, it's just not a good plan. And people don't understand the science behind it. And that's a big issue.
Well, I think it's come down a little bit now, but initially it looked like the death rate was going to be about 3% of total infections, which meant a death toll of 10 million in the United States if we let things go all the way by a natural infection for herd immunity. And I don't know what type of mindset you could possibly have to think that was acceptable. But anyway.
And let alone we don't know how long some of those tissue damage is. We're seeing people with long lasting, problems right now.
Yep. The sequelae of COVID infection is just now starting to be understood. And none the least of which, of course, is going after heart muscle, heart tissue.
Yeah, the long haul stuff is really bothering me right now, learning about that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, which again, I would think health insurance companies would just be screaming their heads off over. But where are they? I literally have not heard a single one speak up. So.
Well, and I think Ken made a point too about reinfection rates. And so, we're seeing, I think originally we didn't know that this virus was going to mutate maybe as quickly as it did, and cause other variants. And so we're seeing not only new strains, but also we're seeing the body be able to be reinfected, sometimes with more severe symptoms than the initial infection. So, yeah, I think vaccine is going to be our best option, and we need to try to get as many people on board as possible.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, we're going to have to leave it there and move on to our next story. So we'll be right back after this short break.
All alive. The devil's in the detail, lingered inside. Oh, a holy crime. But how can I hide you without an alibi? It's a lover's fight without an alibi. You took my innocence. I can't wait no longer. I'm playing with the monsters. Everything that brought me alive. Going wrong like nonsense. Playing with the monsters. They brought me alive, but got no alibi. It's a lover's fight without an alibi. You took my innocence without an alibi.
with more sounds reasonable. On January 24th, 2021. Sometimes ugliness must be exposed and put on full display before it can be admitted to and eliminated. The events of January 6th, along with Charlottesville and many others, showed the world who the U.S. really is. Of course, white supremacy groups in this nation are nothing new, but the degree to which they are truly dangerous was given graphic meaning from those events, each resulting in deaths. Tracy has this story, so Tracy, tell us all about it.
Sure thing, Dr. Brad. This is from Raw Story, published on January 19th. Years of impunity for right-wing extremists began with the Bundys and led to the failed Capitol Hill coup. The Raw Story went to the Bundy occupation 5 years ago and warned the impunity would blaze into another firestorm. That's exactly what happened on the U.S. Capitol and could happen again. In January 2016, a heavily armed militia led by Eamon and Brian Bundy seized the Malheur, is that how you say that? Malheur National Wildlife Refuge in eastern Oregon. For 41 days, the two brothers used it as a base to carry out their fantasy of sparking a revolt against the U.S. government. They failed, but the immunity the Bundys enjoyed before, during, and after their insurrection proved to be a model and a source of inspiration for Trump's self-coup on January 6th. The lesson of the Bundy occupation was white conservatives with guns could threaten violence to further their political goals and face minimal consequences. That led to the deadly unrest of the Trump era. Charlottesville, Portland, Proud Boys, and Atomwaffen. Despite this, conservative white extremists were still able to incite violence. Before January 6th, there were so many attacks on state capitals, one expert on the extreme right asked, how many times do they have to storm a capitol before it's taken seriously? Armed hordes stormed the Capitol, finally shocked the feds into action, and they have arrested 155 insurrectionists and counting. But the impunity remains. Just as the government went easy on the Bundys, despite their blatant lawlessness, the government may go easy on a mob that wanted to put heads on pikes and came within a minute of carrying out their wish to hang Mike Pence. Taking a bite out of violent white nationalism will fall to the incoming Biden administration. The last thing needed is new domestic terrorism laws that will inevitably be used against Black and brown people, says the ACLU. The government has plenty of powers to prosecute the extremists. While that won't end the threat of far-right terrorism, punishing insurrectionists with something to lose, the lawyers, doctors, executives, cops, politicians, military, entrepreneurs, Beverly Hills salon owners, and Chanel boots and Louis Vuitton sweaters, and most of all, Trump and his accomplices in Congress will isolate the most violent elements from broader public support. The road to insurrection began in Nevada, where rancher and family patriarch Cliven Bundy launched an anti-government crusade in 2014. After decades of illegally grazing cattle on public land, Bundy was ordered to pay $1.1 million in fees and fines. Bundy, who boasts, I abide by almost zero federal laws, refused, and after three court orders, The government began seizing his 500 cattle. Bundy called for a range war, and hundreds of heavily armed patriots and militiamen answered. The Fed's tepid response backfired. Surrounded and outgunned, federal police retreated, returned the cattle, and allowed Bundy to continue his criminal activities. The riot was galvanized, particularly by the image of a sniper on a highway overpass aiming his rifle at the feds. It was a model for the social media violence the right used to recruit new extremists during the Trump years. The sense of impunity the imagery conferred was likely why so many of the QAnon mob provided evidence of their guilt with selfies and videos inside the Capitol. Like the Bundys, like Trump, they thought documenting their crimes would allow them to get away with it. The Bundy standoff also foreshadowed Trump by drawing extremists with white supremacist sympathies. Cliven Bundy, who mused that blacks were better off as slaves, attracted the 3% militia, which faced off against clergy protesting at the deadly neo-Nazi rally in Charlottesville in 2017, and the Oath Keepers, which promotes racist conspiracy theories. Both militias were on the front lines of the battle at the Capitol. Treated with kid gloves, the Bundy gang were emboldened to stoke more conflicts with the first black president. Ryan Bundy led an illegal ATV foray into a canyon in Utah in May 2014, weeks after the feds stood down in Nevada. Then the Oath Keepers tried to turn a minor legal dispute over a gold mine in Southern Oregon into an armed confrontation. In August 2015, militias rallied at a mine in Montana, hoping to ignite another anti-government conflict. In the fall of 2015, Ammon and Ryan set their sights on Malheur. They arrived in eastern Oregon, championing two ranchers, Dwight and Steve Hammond, convicted of setting fires in Malheur. The Bundys and their supporters warned the local sheriff if he didn't stop the ranchers from being imprisoned, they would return with hundreds of armed men and do the sheriff's job for him. One supporter talked of killing the sheriff. Despite the clear threat the Bundys posed, it's never been explained why they were allowed to operate freely, just as all the forewarnings of the violence on Capitol Hill went unheeded. On January 2nd, 2016, the Bundys and a dozen armed men took the refuge unopposed. The refuge unopposed. That impunity extended to the father-son ranchers who were little more than criminals. The Raw story reported at the time the Hammonds had for decades allegedly destroyed Malheur's delicate ecosystem with cattle, damaged government vehicles and property, hunted animals by air in the refuge, and threatened to kill fish and wildlife employees and their families. The Raw story went inside the Bundy occupation. Nearly every occupier was armed, some with multiple guns, despite a prohibition of firearms. They used government equipment, buildings, and vehicles as if they were their own. They built fortifications that damaged an archaeological site. That's not the way to say that. Site sacred to the Burns Paiute tribe. By flouting their lawlessness, the Bundys believed they could get away with it. Trump used the same playbook, playing his crimes in the open, culminating the insurrection. The Bundys plotted to ignite a sagebrush revolt against Washington. To that end, they set up a shadow government with their own legislative and judicial bodies to displace the real one. The Bundys' cast included a self-appointed judge running secret grand juries to indict county commissioners and the sheriff and remove them from office, How they plan to do that without violence, they couldn't say. When asked by reporters for the names of the grand jurors, the judge threatened to charge the reporters with felonies. When a reporter, when a reporter told Ryan Bundy during a 2-hour lecture on the Constitution conducted from inside his pickup truck, "You want to overthrow the government?" he went silent. It wasn't a secret. From the start of the occupation, the sheriff accused the Bundys of wanting to overthrow the county and federal government. They wanted to spark a revolution. Their followers knew it, but they never said it outright because their strategy was to pose for the cameras as homespun cowboys defending the flag and the freedoms. And the media lapped it up. Trump used the same strategy on January 6th. He told the MAGA crowd, "If you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore." He never told the mob to storm the Capitol so he could play innocent, but his followers knew exactly what he meant. As many as those arrested are now claiming in self-defense, Trump said to do so. In the name of freedom, the Bundys and the hundreds of malcontents who flocked to the nearby town of Burns terrorized local residents. Federal employees were stalked and eventually fled with their families. The Bundys showed up to town meetings and surrounded the room with armed men. Supporters drove around towns waving guns and Confederate flags. Police disappeared from the streets and hunkered down in the courthouse behind concrete barriers and earthen berms used to fend off car bombers. This set a pattern for the Trump years. The Proud Boys and Patriot Prayer have invaded cities such as Portland, Washington, D.C., and Charlottesville, marching under the banner of freedom while attacking and terrorizing locals with little police interference and few legal consequences. The feds ambushed the Bundys after 41 days, gunning down their spokesman, LaBoy Finicum, but they got away with it. Ammon and Ryan Bundy and 5 dependents were acquitted in 2016, days before Trump's election. The prosecution botched the case. They were accused of undercharging, sloppy legal work, and the defense was allowed to stack the jury with rural gun owners, sympathetic to the Bundys' weepy Western tale of rugged individualism. The Bundys caused $6 million in damage to the refuge, and the bill for law enforcement was another $12 million. They agreed in principle, but not actuality, to pay back $78,000 and were freed from further prosecution. To top it off, Cliven Bundy and his followers walked free after a judge threw their case out of court, citing flagrant prosecutorial misconduct by the Department of Justice lawyers in Nevada. The Bundy acquittal was proof of racial double standards and forms a straight line to January 6th. The danger for Biden is going easy on Capitol Hill rioters, as juries and judges will look on them sympathetically because they are conservative and white. Unless the punishment fits the crime of insurrection, the right will take it as a license to use more violence. Disturbingly, prosecutors are already raising the evidentiary bar far higher for MAGA rioters than against Black Lives Matter and anti-fascist protesters. After claiming insurrectionists were planning to capture and assassinate politicians, prosecutors walked it back in court, saying there is no direct evidence at this point of a kill capture team's assassination. Expect the world can see and hear all the evidence of individuals vowing to kill elected officials, coming equipped with weapons and zip ties to do so, and fighting their way into the Capitol to do so. Compare that to more than 30 federal prosecutors of George Floyd protesters. That is unprecedented in its harshness. It includes such absurdities as charging a defendant for a federal crime because the bottle allegedly used to make a Molotov cocktail came from Mexico, and hauling defendants into federal court for trivial offenses such as failing to obey a lawful order. The threat of violence will remain high as Trump and Fox News gain from stoking conflict, while the thousands of extremists he inspired will see violence as the answer now that they believe they are out of power. Unless the Biden White House acts decisively to douse the fire of right-wing terrorism, the next time it may consume us all. I know what we're all thinking about, right? Those damn emails. Were y'all thinking about the emails? I mean, this is nothing compared to Hillary Clinton and her emails.
Yeah.
Hey. I remember all that stuff with Cliven Bundy and his clan out there, and I just kept waiting. Why isn't the governor calling in the National Guard?
Right.
I mean,
Right.
right. I don't understand this inaction when it's these white supremacy groups. I mean, call them in. Yes, there might be deaths. So what? That's going to be the price that those hicks are going to have to start paying before it stops. You can't tell me there wouldn't be the slightest hesitancy if it was a riotous group of Black Lives Matter that would have been on Capitol Hill versus the group that was there. I mean, that it would have taken them months to clean the blood off those steps.
I agree. And I was thinking that too. Why the inaction from the governor? And it makes you think they're sympathetic toward them. That
right. I guess. Go ahead, Tim. Sorry.
Well, I would say that or they're afraid of them, but I just it makes you lead to thinking they're sympathetic and I said this I think before too, that one of the Department of Justice has got to get on board of going after these again right-wing extremists.
I think one of the issues is that they are maybe sympathetic, but also I do think there's fear there because they see this group of white middle-aged men mainly or older being their base. Those are the people that voted for them. And so they're really kind of willing to let them act ridiculous and because they want their votes. Like I think that's honestly a big piece of it. And I listened to a podcast the other day that was pretty interesting about some of the officers that were inside the Capitol versus outside, because we all heard those stories, I think, about some of the officers outside that were kind of, letting the people in and even posing with pictures with the rioters and things like that. Mm-hmm. And on the inside, there was specifically a story about a Black officer that was threatened and, forced away and, slurs were yelled at him when he was inside trying to defend the Congress. So, I do think there's a huge racial component here, which is systematic in our country. So I don't know if I don't know how to put it, but definitely, hopefully just more and more evidence that this is occurring, we'll see something change.
My most disturbing to me is that in terms of the rioters that were there on January 6th, it's been estimated now that 1 in 4 were ex-military,
Right.
which means that white supremacy is alive and well and pervasive in our military. That is extremely upsetting. But I actually experienced this to some degree firsthand. Back when I was coaching football, I went out to the Air Force Academy while Fisher DeBerry was the head coach out there, because he coached option football, and that's what I was interested in learning. And I went out there and watched one of their practices. And at the end of the practice, the team huddles up, and Fisher DeBerry leads them in a prayer on federal ground, at the United States Air Force Academy. And there were planes that had the Christian shield on them. I mean, I was going, what in the hell is going on? But I didn't, at the time think it was a huge deal, because I knew that area of Colorado was a hotbed for megachurches. Now I forget the guy who got caught with his gay lover and snorting meth, but he had to resign his post to that megachurch in disgrace because he got caught with his gay lover. But anyway, that's what I attributed it to at the time, was just regional views. But it's clear that it isn't. So Tim, thanks so much for that story. Unfortunately, we're going to have to move on. So
Tracy.
we'll be right back.
That was me. My story.
Sorry. Tracy, thanks so much for that story. We'll have to
You're
move
welcome.
on.
You're welcome for the story.
Yep. Tim's up next. So.
Messing with my head again. You had your heart set on me, but these feels, they come and go, and they come so easily. Tell me what it is about you that I can't forget, but you're breaking down my walls again just to set me free. Why do I, baby, why do I love the way you always leave me? Why do I, baby, why do I love the touch but never love the feeling? Why do I, baby, why do I love the way you always leave me? Why do I, baby, why do I love the touch but never love the feeling?
Sorry for the abrupt stop there.
And we're back with more Sounds Real. Among some of the most egregious things that Republicans tried to do, not just in this past election, but in several past elections, both federal and state, is voter disenfranchisement. The elimination of the Voter Protection Act was a vile blow to the democratic process in this nation. However, now that sanity can be restored to our republic, maybe this too can be corrected. Tim has this especially important story, so Tim, it's all yours.
Thanks, Dr. Brad. The story for my segment today comes to us from the Huffington Post, written by Paul Blumenthal, and is titled, Senate Democrats Announce First Order of Business for the New Majority, Fixing Democracy. So the House passed the For the People's Act in 2019. Now Senate Democrats name it as their #1 bill as well. After Democrats won control of the House of Representatives in 2018, in the 2018 midterm elections, They introduced and passed the For the People Act as their HR 1, the bill, the first bill of their majority. It aimed to restore voting rights, reform campaign finance laws, and enhance ethics enforcement. Senate Democrats have now done the same after reclaiming the chamber majority with the introduction of SR 1, their version of the For the People's Act. These nearly identical bills contain a suite of policies to protect, enhance, and expand democracy, according to the supporters of the bill. These policies would institute national standards for expanding voter rights, create a system for publicly financed congressional elections, ban undisclosed, quote, dark money, and forbid partisan gerrymandering. But there's more urgency now. American democracy is in peril like at no other time in modern history. The country is coming off an election in which President Donald Trump refused to accept his loss. With the help of national and local Republicans, he launched legal efforts to overturn and nullify the voting results. These lies culminated in the violent sacking of the U.S. Capitol on January 6th that left 5 people dead. Here's a quote from Senator Jeff Merkley, a Democrat, Oregon. Quote, "We have all been reminded in the starkest terms that the government of the people, by the people, and for the people is not guaranteed." Senator Merkley, the lead Senate sponsor of the For the People Act, was Senator Amy Klobuchar, Democrat, Minnesota, said in a statement introducing the bill, quote, "A violent assault on Capitol is not the only way to attack democracy. Everyone who believes in our constitutional vision should support reforms that make sure the American people are able to vote and their government reflects their preferences and works for them." So Democrats prioritized these reforms in 2019 in response to the ever-growing influences of money in politics, as well as greater Republican Party efforts to make voting more difficult, in particular for racial minority groups, and the rising threat of minority rule. Democrats do not intend to waste time. The House bill introduced by Representative John Sarbanes of Maryland on January 4th could get a floor vote as early as January 28th, according to a congressional aide. But it may take longer for the bill to move on to the Senate side. Senator Mitch McConnell, the outgoing majority leader, attacked the 2019 bill as socialist as he blocked consideration in the Senate. But with a new majority now in place, the legislation can get full consideration. Although Senate Democrats will need to hold hearings first in the relevant committees and then the Rules Committee before advancing the bill to the floor, but it may need to wait until Congress passes another round of COVID-19 relief. The bill would need to receive 60 votes to prevent it from being blocked by a Republican filibuster on the floor. That is, unless Democrats decide to end the use of filibuster entirely or end it on a case-by-case basis. Though such considerations have been discussed, there remains no consensus on how Democrats will approach the filibuster in the coming months. There is a lot at stake in whether Democrats can pass the For the People Act quickly. State level Republicans are already gearing up to pass a raft of new voter restrictions in states including Georgia and Texas, inspired by Trump's lies about widespread voter fraud in November election. The states will also begin a new round of redistricting this year, which could cement the Republican Party gerrymanders in dozens of states for another 10 years. The first section of the bill would institute national standards for voting in every state to expand access to the ballot. These include mandating automatic voter registration, same-day voter registration, at least 15 days early in-person voting, and, quote, no excuse mail-in voting with postage paid. Also online voter registration and the restoration of voting rights to felons upon release from custody. The bill would also block states from making it harder to vote by banning certain voter purge practices while imposing new penalties for deceptive electioneering. And it would require every state election system to maintain a paper ballot trail, among many other election security provisions. This section was largely written by the late Representative John Lewis, a civil rights hero. It was Lewis who first introduced these reforms as the Voter Empowerment Act in each Congress beginning in 2012 and continued until his death in 2020. He incorporated them into the For the People Act in 2019 as a co-author along with the bill's lead sponsor, Sarbanes, and many other Democratic lawmakers. In addition to voting rights reforms first proposed by Lewis, the bill also includes a requirement that every state appoint an independent and nonpartisan redistricting board to draw new congressional districts after each decennial census. The For the People Act also provides a list of congressional findings in support of the passage of the John Lewis Voting Rights Act of 2021, which would be introduced in the House separately. The section of the bill contains a litany of campaign finance reforms built on the work of Sarbanes and others over the past decade. It would create the first public financing for congressional elections in which candidates would receive $6 for every $1 in funds raised from donations up to $200. Participants in this voluntary public financing system would also be prevented from raising money from large donors. The bill creates a small donor matching system for presidential elections as well. Previously introduced election transparency proposals are also in the bill, including the Disclose Act, which would ban undisclosed dark money spent by political nonprofits on election, and the House Ads Act, which mandates the disclosure of the buyers of digital and social media advertising. The Federal Election Commission would be reconfigured from 6 members to 5 to prevent deadlocks on important issues. Coordination between super PACs and candidates would be defined in the legislation and banned. Presidential inauguration committees would be required to disclose expenditures and be banned from spending money on anything not related to the actual inauguration. Beyond voting rights and campaign finance reforms, the bills expand ethics and lobbying laws to take on both longstanding abuses and those made evident by the pervasive corruption of the Trump administration. Every presidential candidate would be required to disclose 10 years worth of tax returns under the bill. The president and vice president would be required to conduct themselves as though the executive branch's conflict of interest regulations apply to them. And neither the president nor the vice president would be allowed to hold a contract with the US government, as Trump did for his hotel in Washington, D.C. The Office of Government Ethics would get new enforcement powers, and ethics waivers issued by OGE would have to be publicly disclosed. The bill also closes lobbying disclosure loopholes by requiring all people engaged in lobbying to register whether they contact government officials or not. And for the first time, the Supreme Court would be required to institute a code of ethics to govern conflicts of interest and recusals. Now, I personally have believed for a long time that the federal elections should be federally funded by the government. I think that would be a good use of our tax money and would help alleviate the need for our elected officials to spend large amounts of their time raising money for their next election instead of doing the job they've been elected to do. I did a little search. Now, this is an older article. It's a Newsweek article from 2015, and I'll quote it here. In a typical 10-hour day, they might dedicate 3 hours in election cycles during the 3 hours to elections. Then in election cycles during the heat of battle, it might escalate to more than half of their time campaigning. But it doesn't stop there. Members are now additionally required to raise money for the quote for the party and contribute to pools of funds at the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee and the National Republican Campaign Committee. And as a member rises in seniority to committee chair or ranking member, their fundraising responsibilities multiply significantly. So just as they assume more jurisdiction, clout, and heavier legislative workload, they are simultaneously saddled with spending even more time raising even more money. For example, I ran across one survey, and this was in the United States, found that 23% of candidates for statewide offices surveyed said they spent more than half of their scheduled time raising money. And over half of all the candidates they surveyed spent at least a fourth of their time on fundraising. The total cost for the 2020 election has nearly reached an unprecedented $14 billion, making it the most expensive election in history and twice as expensive as the last presidential election cycle. And this is according to an estimate from the Centers of Representative Politics. A senator previously estimated, the election would see nearly $11 billion in total spending, but an extraordinary influx of political donations in the final months, driven by a Supreme Court battle and closely watched races for the White House and Senate, pushed total spending well past the 11 billion figure in weeks yet, several weeks yet before the election. Okay, so you guys, what are your thoughts about some of these? I think drastically needed changes.
Hell yeah, push it through.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
We need it so bad, and I don't understand why it hasn't been something we've been doing already. It just seems ridiculous how much money just controls the U.S. government, and yeah, I mean, we need it. I don't see any issues with it, and I feel like I have an idea of who's going to have an issue with it and who's be pushing back, but I'll just keep that to myself.
No, to me, there's only one reason why you are against voting rights, and that's because your position is unpopular. So therefore, if more people vote, you won't be in office. That's the only rationale. Really, I honestly cannot think of any other rationale why you would not be for the maximum participation of the populace in the democratic process.
I think already so many people don't vote because they feel like it doesn't make a difference. They don't have, they feel like their vote doesn't matter. And I feel like something like this would encourage more people to participate and get, I guess, more of what people really want in the government.
That's very true. Very true.
Well, and I think if you can just show that, hey, we're doing this so that your elected officials can be at work doing their job as the elected official, not as a cheerleader for raising funds so they can get elected again. And of course, the Citizen United, that fiasco has led to a lot of the problems where now corporations are like individuals, and they can like the Koch brothers can dump millions and millions of dollars into elections to try to sway get their people they want elected.
Yeah, I think.
Go ahead, Abby.
Oh, I was just gonna say, definitely reduce the amount of corruption that we currently see by big business and government. And I think that's gonna be a beneficial thing for sure.
That's always nice.
If anybody needed evidence that every vote counts, this last election was it.
Yes,
absolutely.
We were 12,000 vote differential from losing Georgia. I think in terms of all of the swing states together, it was only 43,000. So 43,000 votes, even though And this is the other ridiculous thing, even though Biden won the popular vote by 7 million, only 43,000 votes separated us from suffering another 4 years under Trump, which is just incredible when you think about that. So that in my mind is the other thing that needs to definitely go is the electoral college system. It's a holdover from the slavery days. It needs to go.
Right. Agreed. Definitely agreed. That's long outlived its usefulness.
Yeah. All right. Well, Tim, thanks so much for that story. We'll have to leave it there, and we'll be right back with our crazy story of the week.
I'm feeling so hollow. Don't you know? Don't you know? I'm living in shadow. Don't you know? Don't you know? I fell for fool's gold. I fell for fool's gold. What did I know? What did I know? I fell for fool's gold. I fell for fool's gold. What did I know? What did I know? You were fool's gold. Yes, I did.
And we're back with our crazy story of the week. I'm going to try to get through this without laughing too hard, but every time I think of this, I laugh pretty good. So when I was in second or third grade, I remember going out to my grandpa's farm with my brother. We were playing around the chicken coop, and I saw that a window was broken. So I told my brother to go inside and stand in front of the window to see if he could see out. I then threw a chicken egg through the window, and it smacked him right in the face. He started to cry and said he was going to tell Mom. I said, "Don't do that. The devil made me do it." my 3 or 4 year old brother believed me. That was then. This is now. We have a member of the Michigan militia trying to use as a defense. God told him it was okay to kill the governor of Michigan. Abby has our crazy story this week. So Abby, do you believe him, or are you tougher to convince than my brother was?
If God told him to. Go ahead, Abby. That's my opinion.
I mean, it should be okay, right? If God
In
told
advance.
Yeah. So this one is from The Friendly Atheist, January 15th, 2021, by Beth Stoneburner. Man involved in Michigan Governor kidnapping plot said God gave him permission to kill. Remember the plot to kidnap Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer? 6 of the suspects in that scheme have been indicted in the plot so far, and one of those men, surprise, happens to be a member of the right-wing militia that stormed the U.S. Capitol last week. And in a recent court appearance for the Whitmer plot, that man claims he had God's permission to kill people. Barry Croft, 45, of Bear, Delaware, pleaded not guilty and was denied bond during a hearing in federal court in Grand Rapids. The hearing marked Croft's first appearance in a Michigan courtroom since being charged alongside 5 others in October in a case that has focused national attention on violent extremism in Michigan. Croft is the national leader of the 3 Percenters, a small militia that participated in the January 6th insurgents at the Capitol. FBI Special Agent Richard Trask said during the hearing he was granted permission from God to commit murder. Correct. Kessler asked the FBI agent. Correct, Trask said. The conversation was part of the justification used by the government to make sure Croft isn't allowed to leave the state. He had requested to be released from prison before trial to avoid the risk of contracting COVID. Thankfully, prosecutors agreed that he was a flight risk and should stay put. Whitmer wasn't Croft's only target either. The FBI also claims he posted a hit list on Facebook, and that included the Obamas. I suppose, in a twisted way, God could arguably have had a sense of humor in all this. Croft attempted to kill people, but got caught and charged with crimes before he could harm anyone. Well played. Or maybe we should stop taking anyone seriously when they justify their worst actions with faith. Just because you're religious doesn't mean you're virtuous. I wonder, can I share my screen and show you this picture of Mr. Croft?
Sure. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. This is the story, and this is Mr. Bear Croft.
What a handsome fellow.
So maybe it would be helpful if we put a face to that story.
Are you just making fun of his beard?
Oh, I like beards. Yeah, no,
Okay. All right.
I think it's the crazy eyes.
Sure.
He has that
Well,
God do it look in his face.
and here's the thing, and all he would have had to done, like at school, right? If you bring in a written note,
That's
or if you get a direct call from God, then he could have been excused. But
my
no written
question.
note, no direct call. So sorry, can't.
That's my question. Did he have a
Excuse-
note?
Yeah.
Did he have a note? Because when I was a kid, I could forge my mom's signature.
Well,
Did he have a note?
see, I think
Was there a handwriting expert?
the direct call would have been better.
Was it carved into stone somewhere where he could say that God, see, here's my proof. It's a rock. It's
Right.
signed God.
It's a note
Mhm.
on a rock.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
where God would put his note. I don't know. I think
ask for a note.
But it would be dated. I think he would do it on paper.
yeah. I don't know. Is God like up to date on new technology, writing utensils? Maybe he would just
Could have emailed.
social media. Like, hey, I give this guy permission to kill people.
Maybe he tweeted it.
Probably send a Snapchat or something. Yeah.
TikTok.
Oh yeah. I'm sure God made a TikTok video about it.
Of course.
We might get a clue based on what language,
You can speak in tongues.
Oh, that's crazy.
Gibberish. He could just write gibberish down and then say it's in tongues. Like no one can decipher that except for him.
Well, they could have had his mom call in, like the horn guy did about his eating organic and having
Is
trouble.
that what happened? His mom called?
Yeah,
His mom called?
complaining that when he was, who I'm talking about, the guy, the Capitol
Bear
riot.
man pig. Bear
Yeah.
man pig. Bear man
And
pig.
he's having problems not able to eat and sleep because he's on a strict organic diet, and so the mom was calling and asking him to get him organic food.
well, whatever the diet is, it affected his mental capacity. That I don't think is in dispute. So
Well, he lives with his mom. He lived with his mom.
exactly.
Yeah.
But he wasn't the 400-pound guy though that Trump was looking for earlier. So
Well, speaking of that, I just read, I think was it this morning, that they have evidence that the Trump campaign was like almost $2.6 million to the organizers of that
right. Yeah.
that protest.
Yeah.
The what?
And in fact, I don't want to expand too much on that because I
Oh,
think we will definitely do
Okay.
that next week.
right.
I haven't seen a published story about it, but I know the exact story you're talking about, Tim.
Yeah. I think it's in Yahoo today.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I saw it on one of the Sunday morning news with John Capehart today, but
Okay,
Jonathan Capehart. But yeah,
we'll save that. Okay.
that's just more evidence that Trump should be impeached. But we'll get to that next week.
Progress, hopefully, we'll have.
Well,
Sure.
my brother was able to easily wipe, shall we say, the egg off his face, but I don't think that's going to be so easy for Trump to do.
He literally had egg on his face. That's
He did.
fantastic.
Yeah,
Hopefully the S is about to hit the fan here.
Well, that was a good story. Good story.
I
Well,
used to watch Little Rascals, and that gave me the idea. So,
Oh, yes.
so I did become a little rascal that day.
Yes. Sucked him right in.
All right. Well, I'm glad we were able to end on a little bit of levity there. So Abby, thanks so much for that story. So that will wrap us up for this week. If you've enjoyed our program, please pass the word to your friends and associates, believers and non-believers alike. Again, just a reminder that you are, sorry, I keep thinking of that story. Again, just a reminder that you are welcome to post questions and comments on our Facebook page. Remember, there is a big difference between having good reasons for what one accepts to be true and having bad ones. Incidentally, this is the only distinction one needs to become a strict atheist. This has been Dr. Brad for Abby, Tracy, and Tim saying so long.